Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really jumping into some big ideas. Consciousness, self-awareness, the nature of reality itself. We're using insights from the Atmapooja Upanishad archives, Satsanga Salon, as our guide.
Yeah, and it's quite a rich source. It covers a lot from, handling emotions day to day, all the way to enlightenment, how everything's connected, and importantly, the limits of just thinking about these things.
Absolutely, it's vast. So our goal here is to pull out those key insights, maybe some surprising facts, give you a shortcut to understanding these sometimes tricky spiritual ideas
Hmm.
without feeling totally lost. So maybe start with this. Have you ever felt like you're not quite in control of your reactions or wondered if there's something deeper going on beneath everyday life in these big spiritual concepts?
That's a great place to start, actually, because one of the first things this source tackles is that feeling, that illusion of control. It even starts with a story about Mullah Nasruddin.
Ah, Molinos Rudin, always good. What's the story this time?
Right. So Mullah says he was only responsible for starting something, not what happened next. He was told to scare a boy. The boy got scared. That makes someone else faint. Then Mullah got scared. And, well, he said everything descended into chaos.
Okay. Okay. It's funny, but what's the real point there for us?
Well, the connection drawn is pretty sharp. We often think we start an emotion like love or anger, and we think we're the master, right? But the source suggests maybe we're more like a just kicking off something that then runs on its own steam, these unconscious mechanisms taking over. Understanding that could actually make us a bit kinder to ourselves, maybe, realizing not everything's under our direct command.
That's a different way to look at it. So instead of blaming ourselves for, say, getting angry, we see these deeper things at play. And then the source talks about suppressing these feelings, right? How humans do that differently than animals.
Exactly. Animals, usually their emotional expression is direct, serves a purpose right then and there. But humans, we often fake it or push it down. Like, you're annoyed at your boss, but you put on a big smile.
Yeah, the polite mask, we all do it. But what does that do to us internally?
It creates what the text calls a mess inside. Biologically, anger gears you up for fight or flight. Hormones kick in, muscles tense. But then if you suppress it, act cheerful. You're sending mixed signals. The body's ready to go, but you're holding it back.
Okay, this is where it gets really practical. That fight or flight thing. Can you give a clear example of how that conflict shows up?
Yeah, the source uses stage fright, a really common one. There's no actual physical danger, right?
Yeah.
No tiger in the room. But standing up in front of people can trigger that same primal fear. Your brain reads the situation fear of judgment, maybe as a threat, and hits the panic button.
So even if the fear is just in our head, the body reacts like it's real physical danger.
Precisely. Same chemicals flood your system as if you were facing that tiger. Body's ready to fight or run. But obviously, giving a speech, you can't really do either. You can't attack the audience or sprint off stage.
Right, and that's the internal mess you mentioned.
Exactly that. The body's all revved up, energy needs to go somewhere, but it can't. And that tension shows up physically. You might start sweating, even if it's cold body trying to cool down for a fight that isn't happening. Or trembling. It's like hitting the gas and the brake in a car at the same time. The engine's roaring, but it just shakes. That's kind of like our body's confusion then. Now, this leads into the idea of embodied experience. How does that connect?
That accelerator and brake analogy really clicks. You feel that internal shake. Okay, so embodied experience, how does that fit in?
Well, this section looks at why objects linked to enlightened people, Buddha's bones, Muhammad's hair, things like that, are often seen as special, not just normal objects. The idea is that these things, by being near that profound awareness, have sort of known something directly through experience, like they hold a trace of it.
Hmm, like they absorb some of that vibe just by being physically close.
That's the idea, yeah. And to make the point clearer, the source contrasts two flowers. One has never seen a sunrise, the other has. The one that hasn't seen the sun. It's just potential. It hasn't fully woken up its own inner spirit, its energy.
So the sunrise itself triggers something in the flower, an awakening.
Exactly. The flower that has seen the sunrise has, realized something fundamental about being alive, connected. It's not just any flower anymore. It really highlights this focus in the source on direct embodied experience being key, something knowing intellectually just can't match.
That's a really beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
Okay, so if this embodied experience is so important, how do we actually cultivate it? What paths does the source suggest?
It lays out a few key ones. First up is the breath, the Buddha's big emphasis. The text explains his teaching. Consciously watching your breath, following it. That's the basic technique to build a center of awareness inside yourself.
Conscious breathing. That sounds so simple, but it's everywhere, isn't it? What's the deeper effect of focusing on the breath like that?
The idea is once you establish that center of awareness, it starts to spread through your whole body. It moves with the breath into your blood, even down to your cells. The source points out every cell needs oxygen. Every cell kind of breathes in its own way.
And it goes even bigger than our own bodies, right? Didn't the text mention the earth breathing, the universe breathing?
It does, yeah. It links the scientific idea of the expanding universe to the old Hindu Puranas. They describe creation and destruction as Brahma's breath creation is breathing out, destruction is breathing in. A huge cosmic rhythm. And that mirrors our own breathing. So the potential here with conscious breathing is to actually build what it calls a body of awareness, something beyond just the physical.
Wow, that's a really vast, interconnected picture. Okay, now the source also talks about sex, tantra, as another path to awareness. That might surprise some people.
Yeah, it's definitely less mainstream for many. But Tantra, as explained here, sees sexual energy as incredibly powerful, vital, and if you approach it consciously, it can connect you to the very center of creation, the source of life. The key word there is consciously.
Conscious sex. That sounds tricky, like a difficult balance to strike.
It really is. The source is clear on that. Sex often involves letting go, a kind of unconsciousness. If you get too analytical, too in your head during it, the desire itself can just fade. So Tantra takes on this really tough challenge, how to bring awareness into that very primal, often unconscious drive.
So how does that actually work? What's the goal for someone practicing Tantra?
Well, a tantric seeker works with that sexual energy consciously, like you'd work with breath and meditation. The aim is to be aware of the energy building, the peak, and to experience climax consciously without that automatic unconscious release that usually happens. And importantly, the partner isn't just an object. They're seen as divine, a god or goddess.
That totally changes the whole thing, lifts it way beyond just physical pleasure. But it sounds incredibly difficult, like the source says, to stay conscious through all that.
Exactly. The text admits achieving awareness this way is rare. The pull towards unconsciousness in sex is just so strong.
Okay, the third path mentioned is hunger, through Mahavir's practices. Now, fasting usually makes you think of self-denial, austerity, but the source sees it differently.
Yeah, that's a really crucial point. Mahavir used fasting, the text argues, not as punishment, but as a tool, a method for deeper awareness. It's about directly, intensely engaging with that fundamental need for survival.
So it wasn't about making the body suffer, but using hunger itself to sharpen perception.
That's the idea. It describes these long fasts, maybe 3-4 months. The goal was to consciously face death. When the body gets really weak, near collapse, it's like you're thrown back to your core, away from the physical self's demands.
Wow, that sounds incredibly extreme. Dangerous even.
Oh, it's definitely presented as radical, yeah. Very demanding. At that point of extreme depletion, the text says an inner sun gets released. Then, after these long fasts, Mahavir would go beg for food in a village, which the text finds a bit mysterious. But the idea seems to be he'd consciously re-enter the physical world, get just enough nourishment, then go back to fasting, oscillating between the physical needs and that inner stillness.
Like a deliberate cycle.
Yeah.
Pushing limits, then briefly returning, all to heighten awareness. Okay, moving on, the source then shifts to divinity, right? How different religions see humanity's connection to it.
Yeah, and here you see some really interesting differences. Some faiths, Judaism, Christianity, Islam are mentioned, believe humans are inherently divine. Now, the source points out if that's your starting point, then growth might just mean unfolding what's already there, not really becoming something new.
Like a seed already contains the whole potential of the plant. The journey is just letting it bloom.
That's the implication the source draws, yeah. But then you have the Jains, who also see a divine essence in humans, but they do emphasize real growth is possible. And Hinduism, according to this text, takes a middle path. Humans are divine, and there's a creator, but growth is more like unfoldment, realizing the potential within. Like your seed analogy is as a already potential in the acorn.
That seed analogy seems quite fitting here.
Yeah.
The potential is encoded.
Exactly. And the text adds a specific Hindu idea. The creator isn't like a painter making something separate, more like a dancer Shiva. The creation, the dance, can't be separated from the dancer. And this leads to a pretty radical thought.
Which is?
The idea that, well, if not everything is divine, then nothing can be divine. This pushes past just saying everything is one, because even saying one might imply something else exists separate from that one. Non-duality tries to get rid of that separation idea altogether.
Okay. Subtle, but huge difference. Not just connected, but fundamentally the same stuff. No real other
Exactly, and that leads to Sompava Namaskara, which means the feeling I am that is the real way to show reverence. And it stresses this isn't just saying the words, it's a deep feeling, where even the lowest feels they are the highest. It's crucial that it's not ego talking like I'm God and you're not. It's about shared divinity.
So recognizing the universal divinity in everything, not claiming special status.
Yeah.
Okay, the text then maps out this journey of self-realization, stages of I amness.
Yeah, it's like an unfolding. First, there's I amness, the ego, ahankar, the sense of me as separate. Then as you go deeper, that I starts to dissolve. You're left with just amness, pure existence, as Mita, without the hard edges of ego. And finally, by going even deeper into that amness through emptying yourself out, you realize divineness. I am that. I am Brahmasmi.
It's like peeling an onion, shedding layers of identification until you hit the core, pure being, and that final state, being like a gesture in a cosmic dance.
Exactly. Realizing I am the dancer, not just some isolated person. Moving from the edge, our small self, to the very center of existence.
That's a powerful image. Okay, then the focus shifts to humility and divinity using the story of Al-Hillaj Mansour.
Yeah, that's a really moving story. Mansour declared, Ana al-Haq, I am the truth, or I am God. And when people stoned him for it, he was laughing. But when a fellow Sufi, someone who understood, threw a flower, Mansour wept.
That's unexpected. Why laugh at stones but cry at a flower?
He apparently said the stones were from ignorance, they didn't really touch him. But the flower, from someone who knew, that carried the weight of understanding, maybe even a sense of betrayal of that shared knowing. And the source stresses Mansour's declaration wasn't ego, it was this non-dual realization, a humble statement almost. If I can be divine, then anything, everything can be. It's a possibility for all.
It's about radical inclusion then,
Yeah.
blurring those lines between sacred and ordinary, which explains why mystics often seem critical of formal religious structures.
Exactly. It's not that temples or images are bad in themselves. It's just if the whole cosmos is the temple, if all existence reflects the divine, focusing only on one building, one image, seems kind of limited,
All right. Then we get into arrogance versus true prayerfulness, with that story about Jesus and his disciples.
Yeah, this is a sharp critique. A village turns them away, no food, no shelter, and the disciples get angry, want Jesus to call down fire from heaven, destroy them.
So outwardly they're praying, following Jesus, but inside, not so much compassion or understanding.
The source really questions their arrogance. They're living with Jesus, praying all the time, but they lack basic humility. Their reaction comes from this dualistic view. There's a God up there separate from these villagers. So if the villagers deny them, they're denying God.
It really shows the danger of that us versus them mentality in religion, dividing the world up.
Precisely. And the source contrasts that with seeing all existence as divine. The trees, stones, yes, even those unwelcoming villagers, they're part of it too. So true prayer isn't asking for things from God. It's a state of being, that feeling I am God in that universal sense. Even dying is seen as a prayer existence, just taking back what it gave.
It's a complete shift. Prayer is a state of being, not an action. Okay, then the discussion compares experiential versus intellectual understanding, the Greek versus the Hindu mind.
Yeah, the source draws this contrast. The Greek mind, thinking, logic, observing from the outside, detached. The Hindu mind, experiencing this sort of irrational jump into being, getting involved, immersed.
So one analyzes from the outside, the other understands by diving in.
Exactly. The Greek way, analytical, is seen as the root of Western science. The Hindu way, synthesis, intuition, experience, is described as almost anti-philosophical. It values realization over just thinking about reality.
Like that example, you can't know love by watching lovers, you have to be in love.
Precisely. The Hindu view says observing love from outside, you miss the essence. You have to jump in. Thinking is seen as verbal, building these word systems like houses of cards, separate from life itself. But enlightened people across different traditions using different words, they arrive at the same core nonverbal experience. Realization trumps the philosophy.
And that focus on experience leads to the Eastern goal being freedom, moksha, more than just finding truth intellectually.
Yes. Eastern paths, as shown here, are asking, how can consciousness get free? How can it become infinite, one with Brahman, the whole? And it really hammers home that difference. Thinking about it versus realizing it. Thinking is just brain activity, might not change your life. Realization happens when the mind stops and life itself takes over.
Like reading the travel guide versus actually taking the trip. You know the facts, but you haven't lived it. Okay, then the idea that we think we know things just by labeling them.
Yeah, that's a really sharp point. The example is a kid learning the word dog. Suddenly they feel they know what a dog is. But the source argues a lot of our knowledge is just that, labels. It doesn't go deeper than the name.
We file things away mentally, but have we actually met the thing itself?
Exactly. So the text suggests trying to encounter the unknown directly, like look at a tree, but try to forget the word tree, forget everything you think you know about it. Just experience it. That direct connection, it argues, is more religious than any man-made temple because the tree is just being part of existence.
Stripping away the mental clutter to connect with the raw isness of things, which leads to contentment. But there's a difference between everyday contentment and something deeper.
Right. Ordinary contentment is often just a coping mechanism, a way to deal with suffering. We convince ourselves we're fine because facing our dissatisfaction is too painful. But that's very different from the deep, abiding contentment the rishis, the sages, talk about.
So it's more psychological self-defense than a real state of peace.
Pretty much. It mentions Nietzsche sometimes lies help us survive, like believing in an immortal soul without proof, or Kant needing God for morality. Useful beliefs, maybe. But the source says most of our discontent comes from comparing now with the past or the future. True contentment, that's non-comparison. Recognizing this moment is unique, complete as it is. No need to measure it against anything else.
Yeah, we do that all the time, don't we? Romanticize the past, worry about the future, and miss the only thing that's real right now. Which brings us to facing death and embracing the present.
The source notes how older people escape into the past, younger people into the future, both avoiding the present. Socrates is the counterexample, ready for death because he valued the here and now. He saw the silliness of suffering something's presence, then suffering its absence too.
His calm acceptance is amazing. Death is either nothing, so no worry, or its continued existence. Either way. Okay, so true contentment is tied to accepting impermanence.
Yes, it's called Visarjan dispersion, letting go, being totally present. That frees you from samsara, the cycle of birth and death. Only desire gets reborn, the text says, not your true self.
Which leads to non-identification.
Yeah, we tend to identify with everything but our core self, don't we? Possessions, thoughts, emotions. And that identification, the source says, is the root of conflict, suffering, because we aren't those things.
We build our me around these temporary things.
Exactly. So the key is seeing the gap, becoming a witness to it all without getting caught up, which connects to the idea of the inner temple, true worship.
That inner temple idea, it pops up everywhere.
The physical altar, it's just a symbol for your own inner center, pradakshina, walking around it. That's really the mind moving towards and settling in that inner space, which leads to silence. And you get that silence by understanding your own mind, the anger, the passion, and detaching from it.
So real worship isn't just going through motions outside. It's the inner work of self-understanding, quieting the noise. And how do we deal with that mental noise? Awareness, not fighting.
Trying to fight the mind just makes more noise, right? More internal struggle. Awareness is the key, just watching what it does. No judgment, no interference. The suggestion is do everything with awareness, even feeling angry.
Not trying to stop the anger, but watching it without getting lost in it or pushing it away.
Exactly. Inner anger is like energy, raw energy. If you understand it consciously, it loses its destructive grip. It can even become useful, a servant. Same with thoughts. They're energy too. Master them through silence, not force.
Which brings us to tackling the root cause, not just the symptoms.
Yeah, the analogy is cutting the leaves off a weed, the small problems, but never digging out the root, the chief characteristic of your mind's habits. You fix small things, but the main pattern just keeps coming back. And often we avoid the big, maybe unsolvable problems, focus on the little ones to feel busy, keep the real issue hidden.
So real change comes from being aware of that core pattern without immediately trying to fix it. Transcendence follows awareness, not effort. And silence. There's that story about the silent master.
Yeah, the disciple lived with a silent master for years. God enlightened just sweeping leaves one day. The master's silence wasn't empty, it was a constant lesson. Stay centered, don't get pulled around by the world.
It's about the power of just being present, without needing constant answers or noise.
True silence, the text says, makes time disappear and brings gratitude for everything. Entering your center, that's real stillness, real worship. The true pradakshina. Rituals, understood properly, are like secret languages for these deep truths.
Okay, then the balance of inner sun and moon energies.
From yoga.
Right. Indian yoga divides breath. Sun energy is heating, active. Moon energy is cooling, receptive. Body and mind have both these polarities. Balancing them, that leads to enlightenment. Imbalance, rebirth. And awareness is what balances them.
And Naiva, the food offering, connect to this. Yeah, naivety is described as the nectar of the inner full moon, an offering of your inner coolness, stillness, to the divine. Awareness creates both. An inner sun, light, heat going outwards, and an inner moon, cool, quiet center. Like the actual sun, hottest on the outside, coolest at the core. Polarity is fundamental.
And anger, other negative emotions,
Right.
they're related to this energy balance.
Anger is seen as accumulated energy erupting chaotically because it wasn't processed consciously. We blame outside things, but often it's just an internal overflow, which ties into that idea about differences often being about empty space, not substance.
The emptiness within matter, yeah. Okay, back to the inner nectar, Amrit.
The initial fire of spiritual practice eventually cools down, turns into this moonlight silence, the inner full moon. That's the nectar Amrit. Being established there means you've known and gone beyond both polarities, life, death, sun, moon. You become eternal, in a sense.
And that realized self is the true offering, the real naividya, becoming food for the divine.
Yes, offering your realized eternal self back to the eternal, becoming one with the universe, the physical body, not suitable for that offering.
And even negative emotions like anger can be changed by consciously moving inward.
By watching anger at its source, without acting it out or suppressing it, that conscious inward look acts like an antidote. It slows the energy, transforms it.
Okay, finally, humans being caught between animals and gods.
Animals are blissfully unaware of our kind of problems. Gods are fully conscious, beyond problems. Humans, we're in between, partially aware. That creates anguish. So, two ways to peace. Regress to animal unconsciousness, temporary, like with drugs, or transcend towards divine being, hard work, but lasting, through awareness.
So religion's core aim is boosting awareness, not just morals.
Exactly. Morality comes up when we interact with others, but the fundamental goal is more awareness. That's why many traditions are wary of drugs. They decrease awareness. Human happiness is fleeting because we're always aware of the underlying misery, right? Growing in awareness is the way out. The way to transcend being merely human. It mentions finding your center in dangerous moments, that heightened awareness. Or Linchi asking, who am I? Turning the questioner inward to find the source. There's also that parable, the king of the night.
Ah, yes, the priests dreaming the deity is coming, but they just go back to sleep.
Right. The divine arrives, but they miss it because they're not alert, not conscious. Enlightenment can happen anytime, but we rationalize away anything that disturbs our sleep.
And reality itself is dynamic, always changing, unlike our static labels.
Yeah, words are fixed, but reality flows. Kindness becomes cruelty, love turns to hate. Reason struggles with that fluidity because it needs fixed things to work with. Even male-female categories are challenged. The psyche has both. This is the labeled world of the mind. That is the unlabeled reality beyond.
Buddha didn't even want to assert that. Just destroy this.
He focused on dismantling the labeled world, yeah? This is thinking. That is no thought. You touch the mystery when thought stops. Thinking actually takes you away from yourself. Relaxation, stillness leads to that.
And the fragrance of that has to come from within.
The feeling of that everywhere is the only fragrance. It has to be genuine inner knowing, not just repeating words. Requires no thinking and no unconsciousness either to really be that.
And ultimately, sansara is nirvana. This world is the ultimate once you realize it.
Bokuji's point, yeah. The division is just ignorance. When you see clearly this and that are the same.
Then there was the discussion on light. Its unique properties.
Light travels without needing a medium. It's not pushed or pulled, has its own energy. It's the ultimate source for everything else. And it persists even if other things vanish.
And it's the foundation of matter and life.
Go deep enough into matter or life, you find light. Mystics experience inner light. That light is the base, beyond life which ends in death. Realizing it means knowing the deathless.
Inner light transforms things, dissolves karma, ego.
Accumulated karma, that material dust, forms the ego. When karma dissolves, ego goes too. It's like a new birth into pure light. Outer light comes and goes. Inner light is constant. It's the bath that cleanses clinging, keeps you centered.
And the vertical path to the deathless. Light and love.
From any point in life. A, you can move horizontally to another life moment, B, which leads to death, or move vertically down to light or up to love. Both lead beyond death. Death is horizontal movement. Death is love's enemy. Fear is rooted in fear of death. No deathlessness, you know love. Yoga often focuses on dropping down to light. Bhakti, devotion, on rising up to love. But light and love are connected aspects of the deathless.
Entering the inner light? You don't see light itself, only things it illuminates?
Right. Light is inferred, the path, feel the mind's content, mind gets clearer, become aware of the light source at the center, enter the source, that's the path. Mastery over mind, life, consciousness comes through awareness, entering that inner illumination, realizing eternity.
God isn't a person, but the law of grace that works when you enter that light field.
That's the idea presented, not an entity, but a law that activates.
And beyond light, existence itself.
Science might stop at light. Religion points beyond to existence.
Because even light needs time to travel, making it dependent on time. Religion posits something timeless.
Exactly. So the true temple is within, the true bath is in that inner light. Rituals without understanding are empty. Light is the bridge between the divine and the world.
And the importance of sticking to one path. Mixing them creates confusion.
Every path is seen as complete. Mixing just muddies the waters. In the past, they even discouraged knowing about other paths.
And new ways to categorize past, relaxation versus effort.
Old labels, Hindu, Christian, aren't always the most helpful now. Two basic types: relaxation, surrender, effortless, immediate, and will effort, using techniques, preparation. Surrender sounds simple, but it's hard because the mind immediately asks how.
Well,
Start has many techniques, seems harder due to prep, but gets refined over time.
wow, okay, that was an incredibly deep and really illuminating dive. So much there. We covered the illusion of control, the importance of actually feeling things, embodied experience, the different paths like breath, tantra, even hunger.
The nature of divinity, non-duality, that whole journey of self-realization.
Right, and the limits of just thinking about it, the labels, the power of being present, not comparing.
And awareness being key, not fighting the mind, balancing those inner energies, sun and moon.
And finally, light, consciousness, grace. Wow, it really pushes you to look beyond the surface, doesn't it? Beyond our usual ways of seeing ourselves and the world.
It really does. It's a call to question those ingrained identities and assumptions.
So, for you listening, what really clicked? Which of these ideas sparked something? And, what might that tell you about where you are? And maybe a final thought to chew on. If reality deep down is beyond all our words and labels, how does that actually change how you see yourself, how you see the world? And maybe, what's that chief characteristic in your own mind, that root pattern that might be worth just becoming a little more aware of?
Good questions to sit with.
Definitely. We hope you'll keep exploring these ideas and maybe even share what comes up for you.